All right, so this week in U.S. history, we are looking at the beginnings of the American Revolution, what is actually going to lead us to the fighting, which is where we're going to pick up next week. Now, for the first couple of lessons this week, you've actually been looking at the events in the beginning, okay? I've been stressing that we are angry. In fact, everybody in North America is angry. The British are angry. We're angry. The Native Americans are angry. The French were angry. And we're looking at ways to justify that anger, to help explain that anger. We're also looking at ways to justify what is going to happen next, namely the American Revolution. And the person that's probably going to have the biggest influence on that is a man by the name of John Locke. Now, Locke came up with some very, very important philosophies. All right. His key Enlightenment ideas that inspire us, number one, are natural rights, the belief that all people have life, liberty, and property. Now, Jefferson is going to switch that to pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence. We're going to talk more about that later. He also believes in the consent of the governed, namely, the people have a voice. Okay, the people have power, and we exercise that voice by voting in most cases. Okay. Then there's a social contract between the people and the government. And we'll explain more about what that is here in just a second. He also believed in ordered liberty, namely, we will follow the laws, and we do that in order to protect us and to protect our rights. And he was a big believer in separation of church and state and separation of powers, namely, that's where we get our three branches of government. So as we move through the revolution and then the resulting constitution, we're going to see these ideas heavily influence us and help explain what we want out of the revolution, why we are fighting the revolution. Now, I want to point out that Locke, by the time we are in the midst of the American Revolution, Locke has passed away. Okay, so it's not like he is encouraging us or he's writing to us at the time. We are basing our opinions off him and our ideas from him on his earlier writings. He's already gone. I would also point out that Locke had a huge influence in England. Okay, the very idea that we have rights as Englishmen comes in part from Locke and these beliefs. In fact, this is what we're arguing for. If we were back in England, we would have these things. So why aren't you, Britain, giving them to us here in the colonies if we are supposed to be part of the British Empire? So Locke is going to be a huge influence on us on both sides of the Atlantic. Now, if we were in class, I would give you some quotes from Locke, and we would do a little reading exercise and summarize what he believed in. Okay, so if we were in class, this is what we would discover. Number one, Locke said power resides with the people. The people have a huge role in the government because they have power. In fact, because we have power, that leads us to give up some of our rights in order to get protection for all of our rights. That's going to be part of this social contract. We agree to give up some of our rights in order to get protection for all of our rights. As a result, the government's main focus is to protect our rights. Now, this is something called limited government. Limited government says the government can only do what the people want it to do. And if it oversteps those bounds or it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, then the people have the right to do something about that. The people have a right to change the government. This is a major point. Government is there to protect the rights of the people and make the people obey the laws, and we should want to obey the laws because the laws are there to protect us and to protect our rights. Okay. And again, if we were going through his quotes, these are the questions that we would be answering and the answers that we would come up with. Now, Locke's ideas were pretty radical because they gave a lot of confidence to the people and they gave the people a lot of power. Keep in mind, he is writing in Europe, and the predominant government in Europe is a monarchy. And the reason monarchies came about is because someone, maybe a bunch of people, thought the people cannot handle themselves. They need one central leader to control them. In fact, Thomas Hobbes, who is writing around the same time as Locke, actually I think he was before Locke, Thomas Hobbes wrote a book called The Leviathan, And he said the government needs the awesome power of the Leviathan, which is a sea monster, to control the people because we are so wicked. And if that government wasn't there, there would be chaos. Okay? So the fact that Locke has come out and said, actually, I have faith in the people and I'm giving the people a lot of power, that is huge in terms of how radical it is to the prevailing thoughts of the day. Now, Locke is a big believer in natural rights. He defines them as life, liberty, and property. Remember, government is there to protect those rights. If government doesn't hold up its end of the bargain, the people can change, alter, or overthrow it. Now, most of the time, that is going to be accomplished, at least in this country, by voting. Okay? But if things get too bad, then we have the right to rise up in revolution and overthrow the government. That's going to be particularly interesting for us as we get to the American Revolution. And then the last question, if we were going through these quotes, the last question would be, what major document do you see a heavy influence of Locke in? And that is going to be the Declaration of Independence. Okay, and we're going to explain more about that in the next lesson. Okay, now that's kind of the background. So here is the notes that accompany, here's what you need to fill in with the notes that accompany this presentation. And I'll be honest with you, we're going to have a quiz. It's going to be a matching quiz. Okay. So be sure you get down these definitions and these terms. Okay. Now, Locke was a big believer in rights. He said we are given those rights at birth because we are human. So everybody has these rights and they are given to you at birth because you are human. He is going to define them further as natural rights, and he will specify them as life, liberty, and property. Now, we have rights. We also have privileges. Privileges are things that are granted to you by the government or granted to you by some higher power, okay? You guys are probably used to privileges in school. You're probably used to privileges at home that your parents give you. And if you mess up, those privileges can be taken away, okay? Rights cannot be taken away. Privileges can, okay? So privileges are granted to you by the government. They can be taken away. Then we have responsibilities. Those are the things that you must do to live in an ordered society. An ordered society depends on you following the law. So one of the things that you need to do is be sure you are following the law. That will lead us to an ordered society. And then last but not least, we have things called wants. Wants are not guaranteed. They are things that are not needed. They're not guaranteed. They are things we would like to happen. Okay? Now, I think Locke would argue if we do our responsibilities and we maintain our rights, then we will be granted privileges. And the combination of those will allow us to fulfill our wants. But wants are things that are not needed. They are not guaranteed. They're on that kind of the outside of existence. Now, John Locke was a major Enlightenment philosopher. Like I said, he was gone by the time of the American Revolution. He lived from 1632 into 1704. He wrote a lot about freedom and the rights of the people, which is why, as we move to this revolution, we are so interested in him and his ideas and how they are going to impact us with Great Britain. And of course, his writings not only influence our revolution, but to be honest with you, his writings are going to influence a lot of revolutions around the world. Okay. In fact, our revolution is going to influence a lot of revolutions around the world. And if our revolution was influenced by Locke, it would make sense that he has a role in those other revolutions as well. Now, we talked about rights, privileges, responsibilities, and wants. Let's look at some key terms associated with Locke. Number one, okay, he talked about rights, and everybody has rights. You are given to them because you were born by virtue of the fact that you are human. I told you he is going to further define them as natural rights, and he will specify them as life, liberty, and property. So, rights are given to you at birth. Natural rights are given to you at birth. You get them, everybody gets them by virtue of the fact that you are human. Locke takes it a step further. He actually defines them as natural rights, and he actually defines them as life, liberty, and property. We agree to give up some of our rights to the government. That is part of what we call the social contract. Okay? People agree to give up some of their rights, some of their freedom to the government. In exchange, the government will protect all of our rights, and the government will do that through coming up with laws. Okay? Now, in a contract, both sides enter into this agreement. Both sides agree to give something. Both sides agree to get something. Okay? So we give up our rights, and in return, we get protection. The government gets power, and in return, it's supposed to listen to the people and protect our rights. Now, our role in this social contract, we'll get back to the government in just a second. Our role in this social contract is ordered liberty. When we give up some of our rights to get protection for all of our rights, the government is going to do that through law. Our job is to follow those laws, okay? When ordered liberty is when people agree to obey the laws, and we do that because it's part of our duty in the social contract, and we do that because we want protection for all of our rights. If you start breaking the law, you violate somebody else's rights, and as a result, you're going to violate your rights because something is going to be taken away. Okay? Now, I told you we're going to come back to the role of government. The role of government in all this is very limited, okay? The government can only do what the people give it power to. It can only do what the people say, okay? So when we talk about limited government, government only has the power which the people give it. The majority of the power still rests in the hands of the people, okay? Even in a democracy like ours, we demonstrate that through the power of the vote. If we lose confidence in the government, or we don't think the government is doing what it's supposed to do, we vote that government out, okay? That's our power. I know some people might disagree with that, but that is our power, okay? So when you ask, how do the people still have power in a limited government because the government is so powerful over top of us? The vote is our power, which is why it's so important that when you get to that point in your life, you need to register to vote. And you need to be sure you are voting because that is your power, and that's how you tell the government what it can and cannot do. And the government can only do what the people want it to do. Now, if the government doesn't do that, then we have the right to alter or overthrow. Alter means change. Okay? Alter means change. So we can change the government by the vote, or if things are terribly, terribly bad, we could actually take up arms and revolt, which is what we're going to do in 1776. So when we're talking about alter and overthrow, if the government doesn't hold up its end of the bargain, if it doesn't hold its end of the social contract, we can change it. And like I said, the most common way we're going to do that is through the power of the vote. But in like the case of the revolution, when we didn't have any votes in parliament, or if government totally oversteps its bounds right now, then according to Locke, if things are that drastic, you can take up arms and you can fight. And like I said, we're going to use that as to justify what's going to happen next in the American Revolution. Now, Locke is going to be the main guy, okay? In our next lesson, I'm going to add somebody else to the mix, Tom Paine. We're going to talk about Thomas Paine in the next lesson. And then we're going to show how Thomas Paine and John Locke influenced a man by the name of Thomas Jefferson. And we get a very, very important document called the Declaration of Independence.